Welcome back to our channel, where we share updates and untold stories about Catherine, Princess of Wales, and her royal family. Today we bring you some news. 1 min ago, King Charles removes Camilla's family from royal line of succession, a line in the sand. How an event on the playground led to a royal reckoning and changed the future of the monarchy. In the rarefied realm of the British monarchy, where rules are very important and feelings are not typically shown in public, big changes sometimes start with a whisper instead of a statement. The whisper this time was a child's vicious insult, and the earthquake it carried through the House of Windsor changed the balance of power, forever paving the way for a new era under King William V. Sources within the palace have revealed that Prince William, the Prince of Wales, has taken the unusual step of officially taking away the honorary royal titles of Queen Camilla's grandson and preventing him from attending any royal occasions in the future, both private and public. The decision, which was made with calm finality, occurred after a troubling event involving his oldest son, Prince George, who is second in line to the throne. What started out as a sunny Sunday afternoon gathering at Windsor Great Park for the royal kids turned into a very important moment that made the Prince of Wales draw a line in the sand, not just for his family, but for the future of the institution he is meant to lead. The day was planned to show what a perfect family life looks like. The manicured grounds were bathed in a warm light from the late afternoon sun. The sound of children laughing and the soft, exquisite music of a string quartet performing for a private event nearby filled the air. Here, heirs to 1,000 years of history played without a care in the world, forgetting for a minute how heavy their family history was. Prince George was one of them. He was a youngster who was learning how to be dignified and calm, which is what his duty would one day need. Next to him was Queen Camilla's grandson, a young man who had enjoyed the modest but important benefits of being the Queen Consort's grandson until that point. Several others who were at the event said that the mood changed as the kids' game went on. The taunting that is common in children's games turned from playful to something harsher and more direct. Camilla's grandson, who felt close to power, started to pick on Prince George. His comments, which were full of poison that felt much too old for him, weren't just kid pranks. They sounded like things he had heard from adults. He is said to have made fun of George's posture, his slow stride, and even his impending rise to the throne as king, ideas that a normal youngster would have trouble understanding, much alone using as a weapon. The taunting became worse and worse, until he crossed an unwritten but holy line and made a rude comment about Princess Diana, George's late grandmother. One person called the remarks unconscionable, and they lingered in the summer air like a cloud. Just a few minutes earlier, the garden was full with innocent banter. Now it was quiet. The other kids instantly pulled back because they knew something was really wrong. Prince George's expression, which had been open and interested, became rigid. He didn't weep, but you could see that something had changed in him. As he gently left the gathering, the brightness in his eyes faded. He straightened his little shoulders in a brave attempt to keep his cool. He stepped back to the edge of the grass, facing away from the others, a lone figure against the vast green. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, was very aware of how her children were feeling, so she noticed the change right away. Her mother radar, which had been sharpened by years of public observation and private love, picked up on the little shift in his walk and the unexpected weight of his young body. As she watched him avoid eye contact and his body trembled almost imperceptibly, a knot of fear knotted within her. She had seen that expression of silent agony before in her husband in pictures of Diana, and even in the mirror when things were hard for her. She knew all too well how hurtful comments might be, particularly for a kid who would one day wear a crown. Questions raced through her thoughts as she walked near her kid. Was this just a case of things getting out of hand on the playground, or was it something worse, like the tensions and hidden rivalries amongst the grown-ups that were building up and now sadly affecting the next generation? The fun afternoon was ruined. Catherine found her son and took his hand without saying a word. She then walked him away from the group. The other royals' carefully planned grins lasted just long enough to make it seem good, but the cracks were already starting to emerge. The royal family's carefully built exterior started to erode as the sun fell over Windsor and threw lengthy shadows across the old castle. Prince William was about to make a choice that would shake the palace to its core and mark the start of a new strict age. The seeds of discord, a history of unspoken rivalry. To comprehend the extent of Prince William's response, it is essential to consider the events of that particular day in a broader context. The confrontation in the garden was not an isolated occurrence, but the culmination of years of underlying conflict ambition and a fundamental collision of views for the monarchy's future. At its center is a complicated relationship between two strong women, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, and Queen Camilla. According to those who know, the two most senior ladies in the royal family were cordial, but kept their distance from one another long before their grandkids had a fight. Camilla, who worked for decades to be accepted by the public and to be next to the future king, never really appeared to like Catherine. Some people thought that Catherine possessed an easy elegance and appeal that Camilla had worked hard to achieve for years. She was the graceful commoner who won over the crowd and appeared to outshine everyone else in the room without even trying. People reported that Camilla once called Catherine an outsider in secret chats behind the closed doors of Clarence House. She added that Catherine could never really understand the sacrifices that had to be made or the complicated dynamics of life at the top of the monarchy. Even though they never said it out loud, this quiet contempt generated an undertone of tension that affected their relationships for years. People say that Catherine is renowned for being calm and reserved, yet she never forgot how bad it felt to be silently overlooked and treated like a child when she was a young queen. This personal conflict became worse since there was a developing ideological disagreement about the future of the organization itself. When Prince William started to push for his own ideas about the monarchy, it became evident that his goals were quite different from those of his father and stepmother, who were more conventional. William, who was well conscious of how public opinion was changing in the 21st century, thought that the monarchy needed to change in order to survive and prosper. He saw a slimmed-down institution that was more contemporary, more flexible, and more in touch with the lives of everyday people. This wasn't just a matter of theory. At what is now known as the Balmoral Summit, a meeting of senior royals last year to talk about the future, William was honest about what he wanted. He suggested a daring restructuring of royal responsibilities in a speech that shocked many in the audience. He wanted to put more emphasis on the straight line of succession and give himself, Catherine, and other younger working royals like the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh more public-facing positions. At the same time, he argued that those who were farther away from the throne should have less ceremonial appearances and patronages. There were loud gasps and a flutter of furtive looks around the huge dining table as the proposition was made. King Charles, who was always a conservative, was shocked. Queen Camilla, on the other hand, responded with a quiet, smoldering anger. If William's scheme were to work, it would essentially cut off her power. It would make her less visible to the public and perhaps take away the patronages she had worked hard to build up over the years as Duchess of Cornwall. It seemed unthinkable for a woman who had been the target of popular animosity for decades to finally reach the top of the royal hierarchy and have her job cut short. Even after the meeting was over, the tension in the room did not go away. Instead, it sunk deep into the palace's foundations, creating an unseen but real fault line between the old guard and the young. Even though she had a title and had worked for the government for many years, Camilla felt that her job was becoming more and more dangerous. The thought of being irrelevant at ceremonies terrified her. She had been through scandals, constant public scrutiny, and a lengthy wait in the wings, so she was not ready to be pushed aside by her stepson's plans to modernize. In the weeks after that conference, every polished grin she gave hid a deep-seated fear. But below that fear, a more deadly determination was growing. It was evident that her goals went beyond just her own. She had to construct a legacy that would keep her family's power alive long after she was no longer on the royal stage. The Queen Consort's grand strategy. A planned game queen. Camilla played the long game with amazing patience for years. She had gone from being the problematic third person in a royal marriage to a faithful and happy consort in the eyes of the public. She won over many who were unsure of her by always supporting Charles and working hard for her charity initiatives. But there was a more planned approach going on beneath the courteous nods and silent respect. People who worked in the palace started to see a subtle but consistent pattern. Camilla was slowly but surely attempting to bring her family, her children, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes as well, of her 5 grandchildren, into the royal world. What started as rare low-key appearances at family occasions soon turned into a more determined attempt to place them in the center of official royal life. Her son and daughter, who used to be on the outside, started showing up more often at big royal events, and their seats were becoming closer and closer to the main family. Her grandchildren were invited to more and more intimate events at Windsor and Sandringham, which gave them chances to take pictures that quietly strengthened their links to the monarchy. There were even rumors going around that the Queen Consort was privately hoping for a future link between one of her grandchildren and Prince George. This was virtually a dynastic goal to connect her family to the straight line of succession. This wasn't simply a mother's pride. It was a planned effort. Aides noticed how she would gently steer her family members into pictures with senior royals, how she would get them to talk to important courtiers, and how she would always find a way to bring up their successes in interactions with staff and the press. It was impossible to ignore the pattern as it expanded. The most subtle and long-serving members of the royal household, who were committed to the institution's oldest traditions, started to talk to one another. They didn't see her calm resolve as a grandmother's love. They regarded it as a deliberate move to stay. It brought up an uncomfortable topic that had been latent for a long time. Was her marriage to the then Prince of Wales only about love, or was it always tied to a bigger goal of making sure her family had a lasting dynasty? Some people thought that the charm and self-deprecating humor that had formerly been her best traits were now just a neatly built shield. They could see a growing desire for power behind it. But when she played her pieces about the royal chessboard, she didn't see that the game had changed in a big way. People were now looking at her tactics through the prism of Prince William's plan to modernize things, even if they used to be so subtle that they went undetected. What may have been acceptable in the past was now regarded as a danger to the future he wanted to create and keep running smoothly. Because of this, it was nearly certain that one wrong move would threaten to tear apart the whole tapestry she had worked so hard to make. Her grandson's reckless and brutal comments in Windsor Great Park weren't simply a juvenile insult, they were a direct challenge to the future king and an affront to the memory of his mother that could never be forgiven. At that moment, a boundary was crossed that no amount of planning could undo. A father's impulse to protect his children was going to take over all other thoughts concerning the destiny of the monarchy. The father's fury. A quiet verdict is given. There was a hush on the trip back to Adelaide Cottage that was deeper than any fight. The faint noises of the garden party behind them faded away, but the mood inside the royal car was heavy. Prince George sat between his mom and dad with his little hands on his lap and his eyes on the floor. The calm he had worked so hard to maintain had broken down, leaving behind a youngster with a pain that was too much for his age. His eyes were crimson around the edges and full of tears that he hadn't dropped yet. When the Princess of Wales got home, she quietly but firmly told her maids to leave and took George into her private sitting room. She knelt down in front of him, her face showing both love and worry. This was not how they acted in public. "Tell me what happened, sweetheart," she said gently. George was unsure at first. He had learned from an early age how important it was to be discreet and how a future king should act. But when his mother looked at him with love, he lost his cool. He spoke in a shaky voice about the event in terrible detail, how they made fun of his fate, poked fun at his posture, and called him a mummy's boy. The worst part was when they used his late grandmother's name as a weapon against him. Catherine didn't move a muscle as she listened, and her fingers tightened around his little palm as he told his tale. She felt a slow, frigid rage building up within her that she had never felt before. But on the outside, she still seemed like a peaceful mother. She told him that he hadn't done anything wrong, that his sentiments were real, and that she loved him very much. But within, she was filled with rage that only someone who would hurt her kid could feel. When Prince William got there a few minutes later, the sight in his wife's eyes told him all he needed to know. This wasn't just a normal fight between kids. Every word Catherine spoke about George's experience hit like a physical blow as she told it in a calm, steady manner. William sat across from them, and his jaw hurt because it was so tight. He listened without saying a word, and with each detail his face became more serious. He knew better than anybody else how heavy his mother's legacy was, and how painful it was to have her memory twisted and exploited as a weapon of cruelty. William and Catherine stayed in the sitting room long after George had been reassured and sent to bed. Their talk was quiet and intense. Catherine said clearly with a forceful voice that this could not be allowed to happen. It is wrong to make their son, who will be the next King of England, feel small or uncomfortable in his own family. William didn't say anything, but his quiet showed that he agreed with everything. At that time, a huge yet secret choice was taken. He was more than simply a son or grandson now. He was the king's son and the king's heir. It was time to stop being courteous and tolerant. The following day, Prince William did something that surprised everyone at the palace. He moved quickly and decisively. He called a small number of his most trusted advisors to a secret meeting at Kensington Palace where he worked. There was no yelling or drama. He spoke in a calm, measured way, yet every word was like an unbreakable sentence. Queen Camilla's grandson was going to lose all of his royal family ties and honorary titles. He would not be able to go to any formal events, state ceremonies, or private family gatherings where Prince George would be present. His name was going to be taken off of all future guest lists and programs for ceremonies. It was a clear, crisp, and permanent order. The edict was more than just a punishment for a child's bad behavior. It was a planned attempt to tear down the structure of power that Camilla had been creating for her family. By dawn, palace officials were quietly passing out the new rules. The lack of noise around the order made it much stronger. There was no public statement or press release. It was simply a quiet internal realignment that didn't allow for appeal or negotiation. When King Charles found out about his son's choice, he was in a tough position. People who were at Clarence House that day said he was unusually still, peering out the window as if he were evaluating the conflicting loyalties that characterized his life. He didn't officially agree with or disagree with William's action. Maybe he knew that fighting back was pointless, or maybe he saw his son completely taking on the role of a future king and behaving with the confidence that he himself had frequently had trouble finding. William didn't wait for his father's blessing. He had made up his mind. From in the Queen Consort's private rooms, the response was anything from calm. The unseen consequences, a split palace. Queen Camilla's carefully crafted public image fell apart behind the gold doors of Buckingham Palace. Aides said they heard loud voices coming from her private rooms, the sharp sound of something hitting a table, and directives given in a tone that was not as warm as normal. Her anger, which had been held in for so long, bubbled out. One version says she stormed into King Charles's study holding a copy of the confidential note that explained William's choice. People reported that her normally calm voice broke with anger when she asked how such a humiliating order could be allowed to continue. She saw it as a personal betrayal, a harsh and planned attempt to hurt her position and publicly embarrass her family. Charles, on the other hand, could only give in with a heavy heart. He informed her quite clearly that William's power as Prince of Wales was expanding, and that even if his tactics were harsh, his motives were not without value. He wouldn't openly go against his son and heir on an issue that had to do with the future king. Camilla was disturbed by that calm, decisive conclusion. She realized that her stepson, the youngster she had previously thought was weak and easy to manipulate, was now her biggest problem. Camilla stayed out of the public eye for the next several days. Her commitments were canceled one by one, and the official explanation given was mild exhaustion. But everyone in the palace knew the real reason. She didn't show up as a way of protesting, but it was a quiet protest that most people didn't notice. She stayed behind closed doors, and her typical friendliness was replaced with a cold manner. People were saying that she no longer cared about William and saw him as a rival, a younger, more ruthless opponent who had stopped her from achieving her goals without making a single public move. At the same time, the palace itself started to change. Staff workers, from high-ranking courtiers to footmen, started to covertly choose sides. At first, people said Team George quietly in the hallways, but it quickly became an implicit sign of loyalty. It showed that allegiance was clearly with the Prince and Princess of Wales, who were considered as protecting the integrity of the straight line of succession. Every quiet nod of support for William's bold move was a sign that a new chapter was starting, one that was better for the future than the past. The meaning behind William's behavior was what made it so powerful. By taking away Camilla's grandson's privileges, he also took away the idea that the monarchy's destiny would be decided by secret bargains and quiet concessions. He was making it clear that he would not tolerate any disrespect for the monarchy or its immediate heirs, and that he would put the health and happiness of the next generation above everything else. And just when Camilla thought the strikes had stopped, another one arrived, this time hitting even closer to home and showing how far William's new strict power went. A bigger job: the duchy and the end of nepotism. When the Duchy of Cornwall's annual financial report came out, it seemed like it was celebrating record earnings and good management under its new Duke, the Prince of Wales. But there was a huge mistake hidden in the dry numbers and executive summaries that sent shockwaves through the royal establishment once again. The name of Queen Camilla's sister, Annabel Elliot, was gone. Annabel Elliot has been a modest but important person in the duchy for many years. She was a well-known interior designer who had been hired to manage the renovation of several duchy properties, from medieval cottages on the Isles of Scilly to vacation rentals in Cornwall. Her work was highly praised, her taste was perfect, and her participation had greatly improved the duchy's portfolio. People thought her contract, which was a long-term and profitable one, would last forever. It was over the next day. There were no new payments or contract renewals. The message was obvious and harsh. Prince William was no longer able to promise jobs for family members of the Queen Consort. This was more than just a business choice. It was a strong statement. People who knew William said that when he inherited the $1 billion inheritance, he demanded a full assessment of all contracts and financial arrangements. He wanted complete openness and responsibility, and he insisted that all jobs and contracts be given out based on merit and a fair procedure, not on personal connections. The time of subtle nepotism, which had been a part of royal life for a long time, was finished. Those who had gotten by on their connections were now under close examination. The reckoning came quickly for Annabel Elliot. William considered her ongoing exclusive position as a sign of the old way of doing things, even if she had done a lot of good work for him over the years. This type of insider favoritism may damage public confidence. He terminated her decades-long connection to the duchy with only a few strokes of a pen. The fact that she was his stepmother's sister made his choice much bolder. The report's financial information showed a clear difference. As Annabelle's income from the duchy disappeared, William announced record-breaking profits of almost $24 million, which he publicly said were due to modernization and professional management. To the public, this was a brilliant move that made him look like a responsible, forward-thinking steward of a national treasure. To Camilla, it was another planned insult, a clear indicator that her power was being taken away piece by piece. There was no way she could defend herself. Her sister's firing made it very evident that no one, not even her closest relatives, was safe from William's desire to change things. People who worked for the palace said this was never simply about money or property. It was a discreet but planned removal of the old guard, showing that William was moving the whole institution into a new period, and that anybody who was seen as an impediment would be eliminated. Many others in the royal household felt the symptoms, and many wondered who would be next. The new monarchy. A change in how people feel. Weeks after the storm had passed, the royal family went to the regular church service at St. Mary Magdalene Church on the Sandringham estate on a clear Sunday morning. Something strange occurred as they walked the same path they always did. The audience, which is typically courteous and quiet, burst into loud, long-lasting applause. But this time, the crowd wasn't clapping for the school or the championships. It was for the people. People's views of the Prince and Princess of Wales changed in a big manner. It wasn't only respect for how elegant they were or how much they cared about their vocation. It was a deeper, more intimate relationship, since they thought they had showed guts and honesty when they faced a problem inside themselves. The ovation from the audience was a gesture of respect, a clear statement that the people recognized them as a kind of monarchy that was real approachable and not afraid to defend its own. At that moment, William and Kate were the complete embodiment of the contemporary monarchy they had always wanted to create, one that prized parental love above strict rules and honesty over quiet. This change in public opinion became even more clear in the days that followed. Kensington Palace received a lot of letters and emails addressed to the Princess of Wales. People from all around the nation and from all walks of life arrived. They were notes of thanks, support, and appreciation. People she didn't know wrote to her about their own kids, their own experiences with bullying and unfairness, and they congratulated her for sticking up for herself. A lot of the messages mentioned Princess Diana, saying that Catherine's intense protectiveness was like the quiet power that Princess Diana possessed. These genuine sentiments were a strong reminder to the palace that the public's devotion is not acquired by show, but by kindness. Catherine, who was believed to be quite affected, read many of them in secret, knowing that her family's private suffering had touched everyone. The staff's loyalty within the royal walls was now set in stone. Older aides who had worked with Diana saw the strange similarities between William's protective instinct and his mother's battle against harshness and neglect. Finally, one long-serving courtier was heard to say, "Someone is willing to speak up for what is right." Team George was no longer just a hashtag. It was the new normal. As support for William and Kate grew, Queen Camilla's public appearances became less frequent. Her grin, which used to be confident, was more forced, and her posture was less sure. Her grandson was no longer in the public eye. Her sister had been kicked out of the duchy, and it appeared like her own power was slipping away. People used to perceive her as a survivor, but now she seemed like someone who didn't fit in with the new order. There was never an official declaration regarding the first occurrence, but the balance of power had changed for good. William and Kate were boldly leading the way for the monarchy at a crossroads. This showed that real leadership sometimes requires going against tradition instead of mindlessly following it. A silent revolution had taken place beneath the shadow of Windsor's old walls. The crown still sparkled, but the decisions taken in secret, the actions of a father safeguarding his son, had more of an impact on the destiny of the monarchy than any ceremony or proclamation. The message was clear: under the new Windsor dynasty, a king or queen would be judged not merely by their birthright, but also by their character. In this new time, a parent's love was stronger than a queen's goals. Thank you for watching the video. Please let us know your thoughts and goodbye for now.